Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for joining our panel today on pre-competitive collaboration. I'm Kate Daly, Managing Director of the Center for the Circular Economy at Closed Loop Partners, and I am delighted to be joined on this virtual stage by the sustainability leadership of three companies. I'm joined by Eileen Boone Howard, who is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility and Philanthropy and Chief Sustainability Officer of CVS. We're joined by Amanda News, Vice President of Corporate Responsibility for Target, and Jane Ewing, Senior Vice President of Sustainability at Walmart. And today, my three panelists are going to share their inside perspectives on why they've come together in a pre-competitive collaboration to reinvent the retail bag, and why this sort of consortium approach can be effective in advancing long-term systemic change to advance material and supply chain challenges while ensuring that solutions are inclusive and accessible and don't generate unintended consequences. So to kick things off, I'll share some background. This summer, we together launched the Beyond the Bag initiative, which is a 3-year collaboration that includes a global solution search for innovative new solutions to replace the single-use plastic bag. These solutions will include reusable bags, innovative materials, and tech-enabled solutions that may mean a bag isn't even needed to get our goods from store to home. And as part of that work together, we'll test and pilot multiple solutions, invest in recovery infrastructure, and scale new approaches nationwide. In addition to the founding companies who are with me today, Kroger and Walgreens have joined the initiative, and we're actively seeking more retailers to join the consortium and to increase our scale and impact. So I'm eager to hear from our panelists on what inspired them to take this collaborative approach and join forces with their competitors. Eileen, why don't we start with you? And if you'll need to take yourself off mute.
Is that better?
Great.
Can you hear me?
Better.
Apologies.
Yes.
As a health, we know that the health of the planet is linked to the health of all people. So when we step back and look to do what we've committed to do as a company to transform health, we needed to look for innovation, and the closed loop approach was very appealing to us. We also understood that for some time now, in order to be successful, we need to bring the customer along on the journey. Existing solutions, as Kate mentioned, haven't really been broadly adopted in this class of trade, in the pharmacy class of trade in particular. And we found that our customers really weren't bringing reusable bags because sometimes they were leaving with very few items, or sometimes they didn't need a bag at all, as Kate mentioned. We have nearly 10,000 locations across the country, and they're more oftentimes located in central and urban areas. So customers may not have access to a car or will be walking to our stores or taking public transportation. So we needed to think about that and factor in the ability to bring items home conveniently into the equation. And I would say, finally, we know that this issue is not one that we can address on our own, and that collaboration really is required across industries and critical if we're going to be successful. So ultimately, for me, I think our collective approach sends an important unified message of commitment and sends a signal to suppliers and innovators and others for change, and how closely together we are standing with each other to make sure that we do see some change.
And Amanda, does that resonate with you in terms of Target's position on how to approach this sort of challenge?
Absolutely. You know, I'll start with just saying it's a pleasure to be here at Circularity 2020 and to sit on this panel in our own homes with my esteemed colleagues from Closed Loop, Walmart, and CVS. Absolutely, I can relate a lot to what Eileen shared. At Target, we do put the needs of people, communities, and the planet at the heart of how we work and how we approach problems. And as you may know, offering our guests a retail bag that needs and is better for the planet is a challenge facing the entire industry. The sheer scale of the issue of plastic retail bags necessitates pre-competitive collaboration to put our heads together and to discover sustainable solutions. And I believe we can leverage our collective size and scale, as Eileen said, to innovate and execute solutions that are at that intersection of design, function, and sustainability. So that's why we're excited to be part of this groundbreaking consortium. This challenge is far too pressing to work in isolation. And it's my hope that this collaborative effort is just the beginning of a united effort to tackle the environmental and cultural challenges that affect all of us.
And Jane, over to you. Walmart has joined this with that shared sense of urgency. Can you speak a little bit more to your motivation for joining forces with your competitors?
Absolutely, and very similar to and Eileen have framed it. This is a massive challenge, and we really believe we have to approach it as an industry. As Ellen MacArthur mentioned during the opening session this morning, achieving a circular economy requires system change and pre-competitive collaboration. So we couldn't have said it better ourselves, but we've seen great progress on this in the packaging space, and now we need to bring it into shopping bags, pickup and delivery materials and models. So we know that as Walmart, we're not going to figure this out on our own. Target's not going to figure it out on their own, nor as CVS. It's because it's difficult to get people to adopt new things. So we need solutions to become industry norms that really foster that consumer engagement, and most importantly, change the customer behavior. So we believe we can get there faster together and accelerate the pace of innovation to really create viable, sustainable solutions that work for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing a lot of focus on the customer, and that's great. This idea that in terms of systemic change that is nationwide, we're then taking the burden off of the customer to have to be the one to navigate the challenge of getting their goods home, and rather offering the convenience, but also lessening the environmental impact that we've seen with the single-use plastic bag as it gets into our waterways, et cetera. And so even with the collaborative mindset that you've all described, there certainly are barriers to overcome when deciding to work so closely with a competitor on a shared challenge. I'm sure this wasn't immediately, obvious to everyone in the industry or the ecosystem. Amanda, maybe you could share some of the hurdles that you see to companies working in this way and how you overcame them.
Yeah, I think to create real change against something as challenging as the retail bag, you do need innovation, but you also need organizations like Closed Loop Partners and brands that are here today to be curious, to be open-minded, to be flexible, and really available to entertain new solutions. The idea of really listening, learning, and co-creating is not always easy. It requires discipline, it requires patience, it requires a willingness to approach the issue and work differently, because it's important to embed the voices of lived experiences in the community into the business and into the brand and into this type of project. I'll share a personal example. I was the lead merchant in developing one of our own brands, Cat and Jack, and we created that brand by listening, learning, and co-creating with families. And it did make the process different. One of the values of this brand was inclusivity. And the team surfaced that if the brand was for all kids, all families, what about my kids, children with disabilities? And so we worked collaboratively with many parents to help design solutions that met the needs of their children. And we couldn't have done that work without their input and ideas. So inviting more people to the table, more minds, working together on challenges breeds new ideas. It breeds better ideas and innovative solutions that address more than one problem. But it does take time, and it takes patience, and it takes some flexibility to let go for us to continue to collaborate and bring more people and companies to the table.
Mm-hmm. And just thinking of that time and patience, Eileen, I think I'll ask you the question of why now? This has been a challenging year, to say the least. Why is this type of work a priority?
Well, sustainability has been gaining the last couple of years, and clearly in the public eye, it is front and center of the media, and consumers are really interested to understanding how companies like ours are mitigating their impact. And it is something that a lot of people are talking about, policymakers, people around the water cooler, talking about sustainability and its opportunities for the future. I'd also say all of us, large companies, are focused on sustainable development goals and looking forward to their 2030 targets. And in a number of cases, it will require collaboration to meet this over the long term. The time in particular now is because these issues aren't one-time short-term solutions. They're going to take a lot of time to course correct. And as we continue to talk about the customer, we need customers to come along on this journey, to be part of the solution. Amanda said it, really, really well. The idea of bringing them into the fold to really understand what they're thinking about, particularly in different classes of trade. That's why it's so important to have other retailers join this effort, because we need more voices, we need more perspectives, because it will take some time to course correct. And just take right now, unfortunately, with COVID-19, we've seen a resurgence in the use of single plastic. So we have to make sure that all the work that we've already done to move it forward from an impact perspective doesn't get lost in the shuffle. So now I think we've got our voices, we've got our passion, and we've got these great group of brands here that are online, but we also have others joining the team as well, where all the stars are aligned. And I hate saying that because it sort of jinxes it, but the thought is that we really have the opportunity now to really come together. Collectively, retail's done this in a variety of different capacities over the last couple of years, but I think, now with the help of Closed Loop and the help of all of us who have done our own due diligence on what's the right thing for our customer, every one of us up here on the screen, it does market research, and every one of us knows what he thinks about and what the families think about. But, now coming together with others and bringing more people to the table, I think, the art of possible has grown very, very large. I'm excited about, Amanda talked about the design component. That's the part that's really interesting, because you really want the customer and the broader environment to really get on this. This is not like a fashion. This is really a part of their everyday life. And so we really need them to really grasp it and really make it part of what their everyday life is.
Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing from all of you the importance of inclusion, and certainly putting customer first, having them at the table. And so just thinking about other retailers, other organizations who are thinking about this type of approach of pre-competitive collaboration, of breaking down those barriers between themselves and their competitors, and thinking about things in a new way. And Jane, from your perspective at Walmart, what would your advice be to other brands that are considering embarking on a project like this with their competitors? What are the hazards they should look out for? What are the rewards that they'll get that they wouldn't otherwise see?
Oh, I think that there's so many things. I would probably pick out 3. I would say, first of all, get really clear on what problem you're trying to solve. Really examine and understand the issue, because I think if you're clear about the problem, you have a much better chance of finding the right solution. So in the case of Beyond the Bag, we weren't just looking for a better bag. We're looking, as you've heard, for new ways for customers to transport items back home or wherever they need to take them. I think the second thing I would say is seek out allies that have a shared vision. As we were kicking this off, it was very clear from the different conversations that Target and CVS had the same. They were seeking the same kind of outcome, and it made total sense to align and make the sum of the parts the whole much bigger than the sum of the parts. And then finally, I would say probably most importantly, like, how do you engage a broad set of innovators to help address the challenge? And I think this touches on your point about inclusion, Kate. Having different perspectives, different people with different backgrounds, maybe some unexpected people from different areas, trying to solve this problem together. That's where you get true innovation. So I think that's the bit that's exciting for me. So looking for organizations or individuals and groups outside of the standard network, they can be really the ones that can bring creative and effective. While there are or potential hurdles, I think the opportunities are really endless. And if you come into it with an open mind, really can achieve something special together.
I like that, the idea of that the partnerships can be unexpected too, in terms of, we're talking right now about what is the impact for retailers, what is their contribution and the impact they'll be making, but certainly all along the value chain, there are people and organizations who will be involved in this, in particular for the retail bag. The Ocean Conservancy, Conservation International are serving as environmental advisors. And we're looking at the innovation that we want to identify, and of course also looking at consumer behavior. How do we align that innovation with how consumers expect things to be done, and really thinking about the future of retail And how can it be that we're not thinking about the bag of 2019 or even only the bag of 2020, but really how can this future way of getting goods home align with the way that retail is changing? And then how do we make sure that we've aligned these innovations with the infrastructure and making the investments in recovery to ensure that these solutions solve for the environmental impact of the single-use plastic bag and at the same time work for the customers and work for your frontline staff. So Amanda, I'd love to get your take on really thinking about all of those different areas that this initiative will be going into. What are you most excited about as Beyond the Bag really unfolds and starts to do all of this work?
Well, hopefully you can tell I'm an optimist, so I'm pretty excited about the potential of this collaboration. The idea of bringing innovators, suppliers, designers, problem solvers to submit, it's going to hopefully breed transformative ideas. You know, it's wonderful to have continuous improvement. It's wonderful to point in the right direction. It's great to think of a slightly better bag, but the real excitement is when you're open to a transformative idea and thinking about how we can actually reinvent it in a way that hasn't been thought of. So that's what I'm excited about. I hope we reinvent the way companies address and solve this issue, and it will require not just the innovation and the design, but the culture and the openness of the broader ecosystem to really show up in it potentially, and that's exciting. So multi-entity teams engaging with collective resources. Who knows what problems we can solve together? So I just think working smarter, working together is what gives me hope.
And that's really encouraging to hear. And I think we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go over to the chat and share some of the comments there. And
Can I just make one other comment too?
Of course.
Just tagging on what Amanda said. I think the opportunity to go across the supply chain, you know, really has that opportunity to really affect not only the use and the resource and the from a retailer perspective, but also from the supplier perspective, how we're really thinking about it across the chain. And I think that's the interesting thing about this approach, is that we are going to bring so many different voices to the table. And what will this translate into beyond the bag? What does beyond the bag mean? What we want it to mean. You know, it could mean in terms of how we get shipped into DCs, how we think about that from an overarching perspective, I think is really important. And the other part I would add is, you know, going back to the customer one more time, most customers don't know really what the best environmental impact is between paper and plastic because of all of the issues that are going on in regions and municipalities about paper bags, and the paper bags are not great. And clearly, when municipalities are forcing that issue, they may not understand it either. So there's a lot of education that has to happen, and part of the benefit of this collaborative is that there's going to be more voices pushing out the same conversation. We'll be all singing from the same page, and we'll all be saying the messages in the right way so that we get more attention. The human brain listens to things after 6 to 8 times. So we need to have more voices telling her and her family what this is about and how it benefits her, and how each one of the partners and stakeholders in that wheel can really leverage the power of this. So I'm really thrilled with the opportunity, as Jane and Amanda said, really bringing that innovation and creativity, but also the concerted effort of all walking and talking and singing from the same page. Hymnal, you know what I mean? The analogy.
And I think that the point that you're making about the storytelling, the communications is so important, and really seeing that your 3 organizations, your 3 companies are sending market signals to that entire supply chain that you mentioned, and that the suppliers want to know, what is it that you need? What do your customers supply that? And thinking about the impact that something like this can have on the supply chain, it leads me to one of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat, which is, what's the intersection that you see between this sort of sustainability initiative and your resiliency efforts within the company? How do you see those 2 areas being intertwined?
I can jump in first, maybe Kate. So I think the whole area of ESG is becoming increasingly important for every company. We're about to launch our ESG report tomorrow, actually, and I think that spells out pretty well how critical these things are in coming together. Like it has to be. Everything is connected, I guess, is my core message. So yes, they absolutely are brought together.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. The business case of sustainability continues to be proven when you look at financial results and investments in material topics and sustainability. So the idea that you're solving a problem like plastics, single-use plastics, but you're thinking about it in terms of consumers, in terms of your team members, in terms of environmental impact and your social impact, it really allows you to think about your model in terms of removing waste. And whenever I whenever I have a problem to solve, usually if you dig deep enough, the solution will provide more, it'll solve more than one problem. And I think that's what I'm hopeful for this, is it's not just a solution around goods. We think about it in terms of the humans involved and in terms of the innovators and in terms of the entire supply chain, because when that's functioning in a healthy way, it's good for business.
I think that's really well said, Amanda. Sorry, I was just gonna say, I think it's something increasingly our customers and our associates expect from all companies. So, sorry, Eileen, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna agree with everyone. I think that I'm always conscious of unintended consequences. You make a change here, you do something good, and you have to I think part of the effort here is to really look at the unintended consequences, because you can't squeeze one and then it'll come out the other way. COVID has actually taught us a lot about resiliency in the perspective of no one really knew this was going to happen the way it was going to happen. I've been sitting in this desk since March 8th, and I really want to get out. But the idea of the impact that all of us being home and doing things differently and the opportunities it provides us, I think every company really goes through that exercise on an iterative basis. And so the opportunity to think about this as a way to sort of mitigate other things, I think provides a great opportunity for all of us. All of us can go through this process alone, but when you go through the process and learn from each other's opportunities, and I would say, as a nod to both of my brands here next to us, our partners, they're really smart. They know what they're doing, and they really get this space and how to think about things from a scalable perspective. And as from we think about things as a scalable perspective, I would offer that as an opportunity for any other retailer that wants to join this, because you get the perspective of that scalability. All the success is going to be driven off of the fact that we're going to come up with an innovative solution that is scalable, that other people can adopt, and it becomes less of a burden for some of these smaller companies that will make a difference in their resiliency and their opportunities if they participate. I'm beating the dead horse with join the group, but joining the group is a really big opportunity for people, and it's all walks of life are welcome.
And Eileen, something that you're focusing on aligns with one of the questions in the chat, and thinking about there's not a quick fix here, and that's why we're looking at systemic long-term approaches that can help scale nationally. And one of the questions is there a plan for small businesses to be able to take advantage of this as well? And I'm just going to ask everybody to mute when they're not speaking, because there's a little background noise. And so in addition to always looking out for unintended consequences and paying attention to that, there's also the positive side of that coin, which is the ripple effect that this work will have, that the leadership that you're showing in sending the market signals, in identifying the innovation and doing all of the testing. And on the part of closed loop partners, we're very focused on de-risking these innovations and really seeing how can they commercialize and scale in a way that aligns with real needs within operations. And I think that the ripple effect for small businesses is that you're opening up the market for these innovations, you're doing the heavy lift of testing them and de-risking them. And then that makes that available to the ecosystem, that the suppliers are starting to respond to the needs that you're generating and the innovations that you've prioritized. And I think that has a very positive ripple effect in the marketplace for the small businesses that in the chat, a couple of different people have asked about how they can get that help. Oh, and Eileen, if you could unmute.
Sorry, it's the development of standards and requirements that we know for a vendor community, small business, understanding what those standards are and how to meet them and being very clear about it, I think will make a huge difference to small businesses' opportunities to integrate with the larger companies. But, success begets success. And if we don't really force this, I think it's just going to be something that we're going to continually chase over time. And I would love for more classes of trade to jump in here, because there are smaller businesses within other different classes of trade and retail that I think could benefit from it. I mean, grocery stores have gotten it down in the sense people are used to having a reusable bag, but not so much in other classes of trade. So we have to really bring a different perspective, and small business can be helpful in that, because particularly when you're thinking about, smaller retailers in rural marketplaces, how are they thinking about it? They can have an impact to the way things shows up in a landfill.
Mm-hmm. And I think, another question that we get sometimes is looking at the grocery store example, which of course this Beyond the Bag initiative is encompassing all different retail sectors. We want to make sure that customers are able to get their goods home, whether at the grocery store, at the pharmacy, at an apparel store. The question is, well, isn't there an easy answer? Can everybody just use reusable bags? And could you shed some light, any of you, on why reusable bags certainly have their place, but that we need to search for new and better answers?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. And that when I first came into this role, that was like, well, why doesn't everybody just use reusable bags? I come from the UK, and that habit has formed, very, very heavily in the last few years. But I think, customers want convenience in getting products from store to homes or wherever they need to take it to, and not everybody's needs are the same. So even in states where reusable bags are adopted at a high rate, we can see that customers still make unplanned shopping trips. They will require a single-use solution from time to time. So we really feel that, Beyond the Bag will help us try and identify hopefully a range of solutions that meet those diverse needs, and then really bring value to the recovery systems after use. So yes, reusable bags hopefully will play a part, but we think it's much broader than that.
Mm-hmm. And there's another question in the chat about policy barriers and enablers. And I can speak to that, and happy for others to chime in, that definitely looking at the regulatory environment across the United States is absolutely part of the mandate of the initiative and the consortium. And coming back to unintended consequences, I think that's what we've seen with some of the regulations. And you could even see in the news today that in New York State, a court ruled that the plastic bag ban can go ahead, but it's generated a certain amount of confusion on what that means and what types of materials are really being promoted. And I think what most of the people listening in know is that all of the materials that could be used in the bag come with some sort of impact. And so the question is, how do we analyze that impact? And as part of the consortium's work, we'll be putting together best practices and recommendations that we want to be useful to legislators and policymakers, so that there's less inconsistency that has a negative impact very much on the small businesses we were talking about earlier, as well as your brands, and really make sure that we avoid the unintended consequences and drive toward the positive outcomes that all of the resources and research that we're doing together collectively as a consortium really empower us to put into place. So there will be that policy component as well, in terms of coming up with best practices and recommendations. So I see that our time is drawing to a close. And so I just want to thank our three panelists. Thank you, Amanda, Eileen, and Jane, for your time today, for sharing your insights, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you for your leadership in this area. And I encourage everyone who's watching to reach out to us at Closed Loop if you would like to participate. If you're an innovator who has a great idea, please submit it. If you're a retailer who'd love to join this party, we welcome you. Come on in. So please feel free to reach out to me directly. And many thanks, everyone, for your time today. And thanks to Circularity 20 for hosting our conversation.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Kate. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.